Welcome back to LexTalks, where we like to say we simplify law one topic at a time.
One topic at a time.
And today we're going to do a deep dive into something that's super relevant
Yes.
for you as Indian law students.
Absolutely.
The Geneva Convention, the Fourth.
All right.
Specifically, how it protects civilians during war.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, think of it as adding like that real-world context to those dense textbook chapters you've been going through.
Yeah, it's interesting how the Geneva Conventions are widely known, but most people just associate them with protecting soldiers, right?
Yeah.
But what's unique about the Geneva Convention, the Fifth, is that it's the first one to entirely focus on civilians caught in the crossfire.
Right.
So
it's not about who is fighting but who isn't.
Right.
That this convention is all about.
Exactly.
Now, the source material highlights that it was adopted in 1949.
Okay.
And it came into force in 1950.
Right.
So right after World War II, it makes you wonder if, like, the horrors of that conflict prompted this focus on civilian protection.
Absolutely. It was a direct response to the atrocities of World War II.
Yeah.
To prevent such suffering from ever happening again.
Yeah.
And it's had a significant impact because almost every country on Earth has signed on to it. 196 as of 2025.
196? That's incredible.
Yeah.
That global reach is really impressive.
Absolutely.
But let's get practical here.
Okay.
The document is packed with legal terms. So what does it actually mean for civilians on the ground?
Right.
You know, like...
At its core.
Yeah.
It sets clear rules for how civilians should be treated during wartime.
Okay.
And that's where the concept of protected persons comes in.
Oh, protected persons.
Right. It defines who exactly these rules apply to.
I see that term highlighted a lot in our sources.
Yeah.
It seems like a crucial definition.
Yeah.
Could you break it down for us a little bit? Like, who qualifies as a protected person?
Sure. Simply put, you're protected if you're in the hands of a country.
Okay.
Involved in the conflict, but you're not their citizen.
Okay.
So, for instance, if an Indian citizen finds themselves in a conflict zone, let's say involving two other countries, they would be considered a protected person under this convention.
So it hinges on citizenship.
Yeah.
But I imagine situations like dual citizenship or statelessness could complicate things, right? I mean, these are issues we often encounter in international law.
Exactly. Yeah. Nuances that international law is constantly grappling with.
Right.
There are also very specific situations, like citizens of neutral countries.
Okay.
They are protected until their nation establishes like normal diplomatic relations with the power that's holding them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not always like clear-cut then?
Not always clear-cut.
Okay, but let's assume someone is considered a protected person. What kind of protections can they actually expect?
So that's where the substance of the convention really lies.
Yeah.
And it's surprisingly extensive. It covers like a variety of fundamental rights, including the absolute prohibition of torture, corporal punishment, or harmful medical experiments. And this prohibition stands even if someone claims that these acts are for scientific advancement.
Scientific advancement.
Yeah.
That's a chilling thought, especially considering the horrific medical experiments during World War II.
Absolutely.
It really underscores why these protections are so important.
Yeah. The convention also forbids collective punishment.
Okay.
So you can't be punished for something that somebody else did.
Right.
Hostage taking is strictly prohibited as well.
These seem like very fundamental protections of a person's just basic rights.
Yeah.
But what about freedom of movement?
Okay.
Can civilians, like, just come and go as they please in a conflict zone?
Not quite. The convention has specific rules about movement and evacuation.
Okay.
Civilians cannot be forcibly deported from occupied territory without a very, very good reason.
That makes sense.
Right.
You wouldn't want people just arbitrarily uprooted from their homes.
Exactly.
But what about evacuations for, like, safety reasons?
Yeah.
Like if there's intense fighting in an area.
Evacuation is permitted for safety or military reasons, but with important conditions. It can only happen within that occupied area.
So they can't be moved across borders to another country.
Correct. And crucially, they must be returned home once the fighting in their area ends.
So the convention is really trying to limit displacement as much as possible.
Yes.
Are there any specific provisions for, like, Vulnerable groups like children or pregnant women?
Yes.
I'm particularly curious about this as it often comes up
Yes.
in humanitarian law discussion.
Yeah, the convention pays special attention to those who need extra care.
Right.
For example,
Okay.
children under 15 who are separated from their families have a right to special care, including education, respect for their religion, and just overall well-being.
That's reassuring, especially considering how traumatic wartime is for children, particularly those separated from loved ones.
It is, and the convention recognizes that it also grants preferential treatment to expectant mothers, mothers of children under 7, and all children under 15 when it comes to food and medical care.
Right.
And this applies even if they already received preferential treatment before the occupation.
So it's ensuring that they don't lose any existing benefits that they had.
Exactly.
Okay, what about work and property rights? During occupation.
Yeah.
This is something that we often study in our courses.
Absolutely. That is addressed as well. Forced labor is allowed, but only for individuals over 18. And only for tasks that are essential to the occupied community's survival. Like,
So things like food production.
Food production.
It cannot be used for anything that directly supports combat.
So there are limits even within forced labor situations.
Absolutely.
What about the working conditions themselves?
Right.
Are there any regulations on that?
Absolutely. Working conditions must be on par with those of local workers. Without exception.
Wow.
The convention also deals with property rights. You can't be forced to destroy your property unless it's absolutely unavoidable for military operations.
It's fascinating how detailed the convention is.
Right.
Like, it doesn't just lay out these broad strokes.
Exactly.
It anticipates a lot of these real-life situations, which is really helpful for us as law students to actually analyze real-world cases.
Indeed, and that same level of detail extends to medical care.
And relief efforts. Civilian hospitals are generally protected, except when they're used for hostile acts.
So a hospital that is misused could lose its protected status.
Exactly.
But even then, there are rules about that.
Even in those extreme cases, a warning and a time limit must be given before any action.
Right.
Plus, hospital staff and transport are always protected, and they receive special identification.
That makes sense, just to avoid any accidental targeting.
Yes. The convention also mandates that relief supplies must be allowed through. And those involved in relief work, like the Red Cross, are explicitly protected.
It's really about creating a framework for humanitarian aid. To reach those in need, which is especially crucial in a war zone.
Absolutely.
But what about the legal rights of civilians under occupation? Are there existing laws simply disregarded?
Not at all. The convention states that occupied territories retain their existing laws unless they threaten security or violate the convention itself.
Gotcha.
And if new laws are made, they must be published in the local language and cannot be retroactive.
So suddenly criminalizing something that was legal before the occupation.
Right.
Now, what if someone is accused of breaking a law? Are they entitled to a fair trial?
Yes. The convention guarantees a fair trial for anyone accused, including the right to a lawyer, an interpreter, and the right to call witnesses.
Wow, that's a very fundamental legal principle, even during war. It's interesting to see how these basic rights are upheld within the framework of the convention.
Precisely. And the protecting power, which is usually a neutral country, can oversee trials, especially those involving serious charges. This ensures a level of international oversight.
This brings us to a topic that I find particularly interesting and one that's often debated in legal circles. Internment.
Internment is where the convention gets really interesting because it lays out very, very specific rules for when and how civilian internment can happen.
It's not a decision to be taken lightly.
Correct. Internment is a last resort. Only if less strict measures are insufficient for security. And even when it's deemed necessary, it must be reviewed regularly to see if it's still justified.
So there are checks and balances built into the system.
Exactly.
What about the conditions within the internment camps? Does the convention address that?
It does, and in great detail. It mandates humane treatment, emphasizes keeping families together whenever possible, and guarantees access to religion, medical care, and even the right to work.
Work? With pay, I assume?
Yes, with pay.
Wow.
The convention goes further. It says internees' personal property must be protected. And they must have access to mail and relief packages.
So, like, maintaining some semblance of normal life.
Yeah.
Even within internment.
Right.
That level of detail here is remarkable.
Indeed.
And there's more.
And there's more. The convention requires countries to set up information bureaus to track protected persons, share information with their home countries, and facilitate family communication.
So like a whole system for keeping track of people and helping families who are separated by conflict.
Precisely.
Wow.
And a central agency, often run by the Red Cross, exists in a neutral country to further help with this.
It seems like they thought of everything.
They tried to.
But how is it all enforced? Like, what happens if a country violates the convention?
Right.
This is something that often comes up in international law discussions.
Absolutely. So the convention has teeth. So to speak, grave breaches such as willful killing, torture, deportations, denying fair trials, hostage-taking. These are all considered war crimes, and all signatories are obligated to investigate these and hold perpetrators accountable, regardless of their nationality.
So a mechanism for international justice exists?
Exactly.
Wow.
It's not just guidelines, it's a framework for accountability.
Okay, so we've covered a lot.
We have.
But before we move on, I want to ask you, why is this all particularly relevant for our Indian law students?
Well, India is a signatory to the Geneva Convention, the Fourth. So its principles directly impact India's legal system. It informs international humanitarian law cases that you as students will study.
So it's not just theoretical. It has real-world implications for us.
Absolutely. Understanding these protections helps you analyze real-world conflicts, situations of occupation, and even issues of refugee and migrant rights. All crucial.
These are all very crucial areas of study.
Of study for aspiring lawyers.
This is incredibly valuable knowledge for anyone entering the legal field.
Absolutely.
Especially those interested in international law.
It is, and it goes beyond just international law. The principles enshrined in the Geneva Convention Fourth have a ripple effect on various areas of law, including human rights law and criminal law.
It sounds like it's a very foundational document.
It is.
With far-reaching implications for our understanding of law and justice.
Precisely.
It provides a framework for understanding our legal and moral obligations towards civilians, even amidst conflict.
Yes.
A very powerful concept.
It is.
For any lawyer to grapple with. It makes you think about the universality of certain rights.
Absolutely.
And the limits of what is acceptable, even in the most extreme circumstances.
Exactly. And that kind of critical thinking is what we aim to encourage here on LexTalks.
Well said. Now, before we continue our deep dive, I want to ask you, our listeners, what stands out to you as the most significant aspect of the Geneva Convention, the Fourth, so far?
There's a lot to consider. Take a moment to reflect on the specific protections outlined, the emphasis on humane treatment, and the mechanisms for enforcement.
We'll be back shortly to continue our exploration.
Yes.
Delving deeper into the nuances of this crucial document. See you soon.
See you then.
Welcome back to LexTalks.
Back again.
Where we are deep diving into the Geneva Convention, the Fourth.
Yes.
And its protections for civilians during wartime.
Very important topic.
Right. Last time we were discussing the convention system for, like, tracking individuals and, like, enabling communication between families who are separated by conflict.
Absolutely.
So those information bureaus and that central agency, often run by the Red Cross, play such a vital role.
They do, and it's worth noting that the convention really stresses accurate and timely information sharing.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
In the chaos of war, like knowing who's where and if they're safe.
Absolutely.
It can be so critical.
Yeah. It goes beyond just tracking individuals, though. Like the convention also mandates detailed record keeping of personal belongings that are confiscated from internet.
Yes.
Yeah.
I recall that from the source material.
Yeah.
It even mentioned something about like sealed packages and detailed receipts. What's the reasoning behind that?
Well, that meticulous record keeping is crucial to ensure that individuals can reclaim their possessions upon release or repatriation.
Right.
Imagine being interned and then losing all of your personal belongings.
Right.
It adds another layer of trauma to an already difficult situation.
Of course.
Right.
It's about respecting their property rights.
Yeah.
Even amidst conflict.
Absolutely.
You know, this attention to detail really speaks volumes about the convention's commitment to safeguarding human dignity in like the most challenging circumstances.
Yes.
Now, we've talked a lot about what of the Geneva Convention, the fourth.
Okay.
But I think it's equally important to consider the why. Why is this document so relevant today?
Right.
Decades after its adoption.
Right.
Especially in a world where the nature of conflict
Yeah.
has changed so drastically.
That's a great question.
We don't always have like clear battle lines anymore.
Right.
Civilians are often trapped in like
Yeah.
really complex, protracted conflicts.
Yeah.
So how does the convention adapt to these new realities?
Yeah, that's a key point.
Yeah.
The world has changed dramatically since 1949.
Yes.
We see more internal conflicts, more non-state actors.
Yeah.
The very nature of warfare has evolved, right?
Right.
With the rise of cyber warfare, drone technology, asymmetric tactics.
So how did these principles, like designed for a different era of warfare, apply in these new, often murky conflict zones?
The convention's core principles, like humane treatment, respect for basic rights, the prohibitions against torture and collective punishment, these are arguably more relevant than ever.
Because they set a baseline standard of conduct.
Exactly.
Regardless of the conflict's specific circumstances.
Absolutely.
Right.
Precisely.
And that's why it's so vital for law students like yourselves to really understand this document deeply.
Absolutely.
You will be dealing with the complexities of modern warfare.
You will.
In your careers. And the Geneva Convention, fifth, provides this crucial legal and ethical framework.
Absolutely.
It's not just history.
No.
It's a living document.
It is.
Shaping how we respond to conflict and humanitarian crises today. So for aspiring lawyers, understanding its nuances and applications is vital.
It is.
Yeah. And its influence goes beyond the battlefield.
It does.
The Geneva Convention, the fifth, has helped shape international human rights law, refugee law.
Absolutely.
Its principles are like woven into our understanding of human dignity and acceptable conduct during wartime.
It's had a ripple effect.
It's true.
Throughout the legal landscape, influencing how we think about the rights of individuals, even in the most extreme circumstances.
And its relevance keeps growing.
It does.
As we face new challenges like cyber warfare and the increasing use of drones.
Absolutely.
Which raise complex questions about how to interpret and apply the convention in these evolving contexts.
Yeah.
Questions that you, as future legal minds, might grapple with in your careers.
You might.
The application of these principles in cyberspace, for instance, presents a whole new set of challenges.
It does.
How do you determine protected persons in a virtual battlefield?
Yeah.
How do you enforce humane treatment in a digital space?
These are fascinating questions.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's about finding ways to uphold the convention's core values. Even as the world around us changes, we can't just rely on the interpretations of the past. We need to actively engage with these new challenges and find ways to adapt these principles to fit modern warfare.
Values like humanity, impartiality.
Yes.
A commitment to protecting the most vulnerable during conflict.
Absolutely.
But it makes you wonder, though, like, are these values enough? In a world increasingly driven by technology and where the lines between combatant and civilian are often blurred.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And it's one that we all need to grapple with, not just lawyers. The Geneva Convention, the fourth, is more than just a legal document. It's a testament to our shared humanity and a blueprint for a more humane world.
Even in the face of war.
A very powerful statement.
It is.
Now I want to bring it back to our listeners.
Okay.
What surprised you the most about the Geneva Convention, the fourth? Was there a particular protection that stood out, or maybe a concept that you hadn't considered before? What resonated with you on a personal level?
Perhaps you have a question about how the convention could be strengthened
Yeah.
or better enforced in the modern world.
Exactly.
Your thoughts and questions are important. Engaging with them is how we ensure that the principles of the Geneva Convention, the faith, continue to resonate and have a real impact in the world.
Exactly, because ultimately that's what LexTalks is all about.
It is.
Sparking conversation, encouraging critical thinking, and empowering you to use your legal knowledge to make a difference.
It is.
So keep those thoughts coming.
Yes.
We'll be back shortly.
To wrap up our deep dive into the Geneva Convention, the Fourth, and we're back for the final part of our LexTalks deep dive into the Geneva Convention, the Fourth.
Bringing it all together.
Where we've been exploring this intricate web of protections for civilians caught in the throes of war.
Really trying to unpack it.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
It has.
From dissecting those legal definitions to uncovering those surprising details about how internment camps are supposed to function.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is.
Yeah.
We've seen how this document really tries to bring humanity to the often inhumane realities of conflict. And I think it's clear that its principles are still so relevant.
Absolutely.
Even as the nature of warfare continues to change.
Right. It's a living document.
You mentioned earlier how important this convention is for aspiring lawyers.
Oh, it's crucial.
It's not just about knowing the rules, right?
Right.
It's about how to apply them, interpret them, and maybe even challenge them in a world that's very different from when the convention was first written.
Absolutely. And that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Because the Geneva Convention, the Fourth,
yeah,
like any legal text, it's not perfect.
Of course.
It has limitations, ambiguities.
Those gray areas, the parts that spark debate, call for interpretation.
Precisely.
Okay.
And that's where you, as future legal minds, come in.
Yeah.
You have the opportunity to grapple with these complexities.
Yeah.
Analyze real-world situations. Advocate for the convention's principles in a way that reflects the realities of modern conflict.
So for our listeners out there, this isn't just about memorizing articles and clauses for an exam.
Right.
It's about using that knowledge
to
contribute to a more just and humane world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Which ultimately is what I think many of us aspire to do when we enter the legal profession.
It's that drive for positive change. Yeah. And it could take many forms. It could be working with humanitarian organizations, advocating for policy changes, or even litigating cases related to war crimes or human rights violations.
It's about taking those legal skills and using them to make a tangible difference.
Absolutely.
In the lives of those affected by conflict.
Yeah.
Which, sadly, continues to be a reality in our world.
Unfortunately, yes.
The law isn't just this abstract set of rules.
No.
It's a powerful tool for positive change.
Absolutely.
And with a document like the Geneva Convention, the Fourth, that change can have global reach.
Yeah.
Protecting those caught in the crossfire of war.
Protecting the most vulnerable.
What a legacy.
Absolutely. And it's a legacy that we hope our aspiring Indian law students will carry forward, because the future of international humanitarian law rests in the hands of those who are passionate about upholding its principles. Those who are willing to participate in the ongoing conversation about how to best protect civilians in a world where conflict sadly remains a constant.
So keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
And questioning.
Keep questioning.
Keep learning and keep tuning in to LexTalks.
We'll be here.
Where we'll continue to break down complex legal topics.
Yes.
Helping you navigate the fascinating world of law.
It's a journey.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Geneva Convention, the Fourth.
It was a pleasure.
Until next time.
Happy studying.